Triple M NRL Daily. It's the Journo Show. A bit of a mashup here in the post-origin fog. Certainly a fog from New South Wales' point of view. Just pure joy from Queensland. But it's a Journo Show today. Danny Weidler is off chasing ambulances in Perth and getting the follow-up to the Wednesday night extravaganza at Optus Stadium. But Michael Chammas from the Sydney Morning Herald is here. He is the Journo. I'm Adam Peacock, and we're going to chat Origin off the top. Chammy, how are you?
Mate, Daddy needed an ambulance last night. He was hoping for a cruisy game 3, 2-0 up, New South Wales, but at the end, Queensland just did enough to hold on. The goal kick of New South Wales let them down, and we head to Sydney for a decider. So
many storylines out of it. Okay, you go into the rooms, or maybe just one room after the game. Or that's the initial thought. Like, what is mood like after it was an enthralling, absorbing game, especially as it got so close at the end. What was the fallout?
Yeah, I went to both press conferences. New South Wales, you could definitely feel there was a sense of we should have won that game. They got themselves back into the contest. I think it was 5-4 in the end. They were so poor in the first half, and Laurie Daly did his best not to say anything about the refereeing. I think it was 8-0 at halftime, the penalty count in favour of Queensland. But you could definitely sense from the Blues that they felt like that was an opportunity missed. And they weren't too concerned because they know if they got it right, they would have won. So that gives them confidence heading into game 3. For Queensland, I went to the sheds after it. A lot of relief. It's been an emotional 48 hours for Queensland on the back of the Billy Slater press conference. And never seen Cameron Munster so emotional in his words and his defence of Billy Slater after the game. I'm sure we'll get to that, but there was definitely a sense of relief in the Queensland sheds. Not a feeling like the job was done, but relief that they held on in the end.
Well, let's get to Cameron Munster and his words about his coach after that one in Perth.
When we got jabs or blokes in the media having a go at your coach, and like at the end of the day, he's our coach and he's done everything he can and tick the boxes for us, and we didn't perform for him in game 1, and he got a lot of slack for it and a lot of stuff in the media, and he didn't deserve it. When you have someone jabbing at him like that, it really hurts. It hurts me personally, and I never tell him that, but now I'm probably telling him now, and I love him, and I just want to do the best thing for Queensland and best thing for him, because he's not doing this for him, he's doing it for Queensland.
Yeah, and that was always going to galvanise them. And okay, it spun in a different direction in the 24 to 48 hours before the game because of what Billy said at a press conference. But Aaron Woods stirring the pot, and yeah, Queensland perhaps needed that. I question the need to have motivation like that going into a game. I would have thought your tank is full in terms of motivation if you're 1-0 down in an Origin series. But the Ezra Mam question, the Daly Cherry Evans situation, Tommy Dearden coming in, big build-up for Queensland, had to get it right, did get it right. So, I mean, how much was bubbling under the surface in the lead-up that you saw play out in front of your eyes and then again back in the sheds after the game?
Well, firstly, I'll blame Woodsy for this, because if he didn't fire them up, we'd be heading to Sydney with the series wrapped up. But
his fault alone.
Yeah, his fault alone. I think the NRL may have paid him to do it so they can get a decider and make $3 or $4 million extra because they didn't want a dead rubber in Sydney. But I think if taking into account what Cameron Munster said, like Billy, regardless of what you think of Billy, and a lot of New South Welshmen, people who grew up watching Billy Slater, don't like Billy Slater because of A, how good he was, but B, that he tested the boundaries with what he did on the field. But they love Billy. And speaking to the players after the game, spoke to Harry Grant. They idolise Billy and what he stands for and what that jersey means to him, and that's sort of been passed on to the players that have come on after him. So it was always going to galvanise them. Obviously, what happened in relation to Paul Green was disappointing. I'm not talking about that part, but the fact that a lot of people were into Billy, a lot of people were questioning his coaching because they'd lost 3 in a row. And Cameron Munster said it. They wanted to do it for Billy because if they had lost that series, no other Queensland coach has ever survived 2 series losses in a row. I know Ben Ikin came out, the QRL boss, and said that regardless of the result, he was going to back the coach. But the pressure on Billy was going to be enormous. It already was. And pressure does incredible things to people. I know, having spoken to Freddie about how he felt in the midst of it all when he was Origin coach, Billy, you could see the toll it was starting to take on him. And you could hear in his voice that there was just a sense of relief after the game.
Yeah, and you imagine, I was thinking about Billy Slater today, about how he then puts his head down on the pillow and tries to get to sleep, because it would have been just like huge emotion. I've never seen it before on the day of a big game. We're going to get to it later on the podcast version of the Journo show about how you cover a story like that when the Paul Green family has to get involved, and they did a comment to you in the Sydney Morning Herald. But yeah, that expression of relief, but trying to hold it all together because you are still the coach and you've still got an Origin series to win. It was such an unusual day, having a coach come out and apologise for something he said and clarify something while his players are upstairs having their afternoon nap before the game. It's just weird.
Yeah, I think the call came through at like 6:30 in the morning to the media manager, and they decided that Billy wanted to hold a press conference, issue the apology. As you said, it is different to see the coach speaking on the day of the game. And look, the fallout from it all, I think Billy recognised that he stuffed up in what he said. I think everyone would agree that he had a right to reply. And what he said up until that point in regards to referencing Paul Green was completely acceptable. But what he did after was an error of judgment, and he apologised for it. I think that the reaction to it is fair. Yeah, everyone agreed that most people agreed that he overstepped the mark with his comment, and then everyone accepted that it was a genuine apology. And upon reflection, he realised that he did the wrong thing. So, I did speak to Rick Green, Paul Green's brother, yesterday. He issued a statement on behalf of his mother and his siblings. I'm not too sure. I wasn't able to get a hold of Amanda Green, Paul's wife, but you can imagine that there was a disappointment that he was dragged into that conversation when there is a view from the family that it wasn't depression that led to his departure, to his suicide. It was actually the result of CTE, and that was what the results showed after they donated his brain to the brain bank.
Yeah, felt like something that didn't need to be stirred up for the sake of stirring it up. But anyway, we'll get to that a bit later, as mentioned in the podcast version of the Journo show. But back to the actual game and the fallout from the game, Chammy, New South Wales. Looking at them in the first half, okay, this is the hard thing to marry up, and we'll get to the refs, or the refereeing performance, but fatigue and mistakes under fatigue late in that half, 2 quick tries to Queensland. But you're trying to find how it got to that stage with New South Wales, with what they could control, or in the case of not control, the ball. And Nathan Cleary, how much that quad issue was a factor in his overall performance. What was the initial reaction from New South Wales?
Well, from the moment Jerome Luai took that first kick, you thought, why are they going to Jerome? Like, it was the ball was in the middle of the field. You'd go to your stronger kicker in Nathan. So then I think Joey Johns in commentary picked up on the compression bandage around his thigh. What was interesting, having spoken to Danny Widler and Christian Nicolucci, the journos who were at training, is that Nathan was going through to kick the ball, but wasn't actually kicking for goal. He said he was visualising. Danny asked him in the press conference after it. But what happened, which we found out after, was he picked up a groin issue in that captain's run with his first goal kick. And New South Wales were worried it was touch and go whether he would play. Obviously, Matt Burton was there. If there was going to be a reshuffle, it would have meant that Luai in the halfback, Matt Burton into the number 6 role. So New South Wales had that issue. You could tell he was a little bit reluctant to get involved in the kicking in the first half, but with the backs against the wall and the scoreline that it was, he got himself involved in the second half. Then they had a Payne Haas issue at him. He picked up a niggle as well in the training at HBF Park on Monday. So 2 of their main players, you'd argue their 2 best players, came in with injury clouds around them, compounding that with the issues around discipline with the ball and discipline with the officiating, giving away so many penalties. It was a disaster for them the way they started. And you always felt they had the points that if they got 1 try, they were going to get 2 or 3 and get themselves back into the contest. They did. They just didn't execute that last 5 minutes very well. And Queensland, the resilience they showed to hold on when you expected New South Wales to score that last try. I didn't think the Kalen Ponga decision was right, Adam. I thought the bunker stuffed that up. That was a knock. That wasn't a knock on for me. That went backwards, and it could have been a crucial moment. Like if New South Wales scored the match-winning try, Queensland would have every right to be up in arms about that decision. That was, for me, a knockback.
For flip side, though, and putting my New South Wales hat on, perhaps, even though my hat is a lime green. Shout out to the Canberra Raiders at the moment. But flip side, Nathan Cleary going through scoring that try, I felt that once that contact was made on the inside, maybe Pat Carrigan was blocked off by Stefano Oitokamano, but I felt that if Nathan passed Stefano the ball, it would have been a legal pass. So he's actually past the point of where Stefano was standing, and that's when the contact was made. That was a line ball. That was a 50-50 that went against New South Wales. I reckon that was borderline wrong call. I agree with you with the Ponga one. What I'm saying is that Queensland just contended with things going against them. New South Wales compounding them 8-0 pen count in the first half was them not hanging on to the ball. They had a 58% completion. So
Yeah. No, but I think with that one, Adam, you got to go through the line. That's the ruling. And while Pat Carrigan may have been lazy on the inside, he should have been coming through for Nathan, knowing he likes to step back off that left or right foot and test the inside defenders. That's the rule. New South Wales had no complaints about it, I don't think,
but that's
after
what
the
I'm saying.
game. So
he was through the line. Like when you look at it, Nathan was, by the time contact was made, he was arguably in front of the defender that was adjudged to have blocked off Pat Carrigan.
The old where can he go? I just think in that situation, you got to go all the way. You got to go all the way through and make sure you're not in a position where you're impeding a defender. So it's look, I think they made the right call there. You could argue that the referee blew the pee out of the whistle. I know there's been some criticism of that. Laurie Daly, he bit his tongue in the press conference. You could see, I think he said something along the lines of, I shouldn't say what I really think. Yeah. Anyway, we made a few jokes about it after the game with the NRL officials, but the decider, it's there now.
I got to give a shout out to Laurie Daly here. So he could have gone heavy, really heavy on the ref. 8-0, that's an outlier. And it's not so much about the 8 to New South Wales. Yes, ill discipline was a factor. You're saying the Queensland were perfect. They didn't give away one. Like they had a couple of set restarts. That, from the perspective south of the Tweed, is the issue today. However, Laurie Daly could have gone nuts on the referee, but didn't. And I'm a big fan of it, Chammy, because as much as people like to say, it's different to grassroots and refereeing in professional game, load of crap. Laurie Daly goes off, whinges, all the players whinge yesterday. That correlates subconsciously or consciously on the weekend to kids playing local rugby league games, local sport. It happens in every sport. Turn the temperature down on what's happening on the sidelines on the weekends, and that comes from the top of the game. So shout out to Laurie Daly for holding it within, but no doubt today or in the coming days he's going to send through one of those dossiers with clips and everything like that saying, you are kidding me. That's how it should be done, behind closed doors. Don't you reckon, Chammy?
Yeah, there'll be articles about the 10 moments that New South Wales were robbed. There'll be all sorts of things. Of course, I think he did well to bite his tongue. And there was a little slap at Queensland in regards to what they were allowed to get away with. We asked the question about Jerome Luai. He was charged by the match review committee. He was fined 13% of his match fee, but he won't miss a game. In regards to that facial on Ruben Cotter, and I think Laurie made the point that there was plenty of that in game one from Queensland's point of view. So, yeah, there's a little bit of spice there. We've got a bit of feeling to the contest. There wasn't that real big moment where a grubby moment or something that you hang your hat off and you build it up for game 3. But I think the weather played a massive factor in the kind of football that we saw. Yeah,
although New South Wales stopped trying to do silly things with the ball in the second half, got their rhythm, and it was still wet, but they played smarter footy. Just also
it just
another
seemed clunky though, Adam. It just seemed clunky though.
First
their
half
attack
did,
just
definitely.
Always, even in the second half, I just felt like they scored points at ease, but it felt like it was a little bit like they didn't know what they were doing at times. They didn't know where to get to or who to go at, and it felt like while they executed plays to score tries, there's so much improvement in that attack, and they'd know that. And that's the scary thing for Queensland, that for 160 minutes in this Origin series, New South Wales haven't really been on. And if they get it right, who knows what can happen in Sydney.
Yeah, so doubling down on that, Jerome Luai, no suspension for that alleged eye gouge or facial rub on Ruben Cotter. I wonder what the people of Perth who are not across their rugby league think of the term facial rub. Anyway, Zach Lomax, no suspension for that elbow when he was trying to get Trent Liero off him. I thought Trent Liero, I was surprised when the the starting lineup's lobbed, but then you see him produce what he did in that opening, and it was like, okay, well, I understand what Billy was trying to get out of him, and that's the point of Queensland in the first half, that they were getting, okay, a bit of a leg up from the referee and 8-0 and all that, but it's one thing to have an advantage, one thing to take advantage of that kind of leg up, and they certainly did it. They found rhythm in that first half.
Yeah, they did. Cameron Munster outstanding, Dearden outstanding. I think all the big decisions that Billy made, the dropping of Daly Cherry Evans, appointing Cameron Munster as captain, the Liero, Capewell, the decision to start Carrigan on the bench, everything was justified. And you can criticise their performance in game one, and rightly so, the heat should go on Billy Slater, but you cannot question his coaching when he can make the big calls under pressure. You had guys like Phil Gould criticising certain selections. Like that's a lot of pressure on a guy who really, he coaches 3 games a year for the last few years. He's not like he's a coaching novice, a coaching guru. Like he even said in the press conference yesterday, he doesn't even like to refer to himself as a coach. So it's a masterstroke. He's done really well. And I feel like in those moments throughout his career as a player and a coach, he's delivered more often than not.
Yeah. Tom Dearden, it worked. The change. It's not like everyone was. I don't know if anyone mentioned the name DCE in the sheds after the game for Queensland, but yeah, his ability to do what he's very good at and contribute to Queensland was pretty evident.
Well, I asked Billy after the game in the press conference. I said that decision was scrutinised, but Tommy Dearden justified your faith, and he said, "Well, I'll never have a bad word to say about Daly Cherry Evans. He's done a lot for the jumper, and he's a Queensland legend, but it's now Tom's time." And that was, to me, like, it was a line in the sand. Like, yes, Jerry's been a great servant for this jersey, but this is Tom's now. And he wore the number 7. He played like you would expect someone in the Queensland number 7 jersey to do, and it'll be his for a long, long time.
So Queensland look ahead to Game 3, the decider in Sydney on July 9, and probably not going to change outside of any injury issues picked up in club footy by those that team. But New South Wales, so Mitch Barnett, he's obviously missing. I don't know your evaluation on how much they missed him last night. Spencer Leniu, I thought he was pretty dynamic when he got involved, and he just ran the ball hard. He looked pretty hard to contain. Do New South Wales have to twist their pack in any way, shape or form?
I felt like when Isaiah Yeo left the field, mainly when he came back onto the field, they found their way again, New South Wales, in attack. So I don't know if you can have him off the field for as long as they did. He's so vital to them, Isaiah Yeo. So I feel like you just got to work out a system where he's on the field the whole time. Changes, To'o came into the game injured. Cleary's got the niggle. I don't know if he plays again before Origin 3's teams are named. And Payne Haas has a few niggling injuries. So nothing really to worry about, but they've got to get through a few games of football before they get to Game 3 in those selections. But there's not panic stations. Like, it's not like people played. It's not like it was a footballing issue. Someone's not good enough. They made errors with the ball. They have the right team, the right balance. If they execute and show the discipline they did in the last 25 to 30 minutes, they win in Sydney quite comfortably, Adam. And it showed how easily they picked apart the Queensland defence when they got it right.
Absolutely. So, Brian To'o, by the way, if there was ever a case for a player to win a man of the match in a losing side, and we've seen it a few times in grand finals, but that was, I thought it was a little unfair that he didn't. I get it that they have to give it to a winning player, and Cameron Munster, Cape will put his hand up as well for that particular award, but Brian To'o, he's like again, like the way he scores a try, players don't, I can't think of another player who scores a try like he did when he just basically became a bowling ball, rocketed down. You know, when you go to the Timpin bowling alley and you're no good, so you just try and chuck it down there as hard as you can to try and split a pin at the other. That was Brian going down that alley, like charging towards pins. He just destroys everything in his path. It was phenomenal.
He was superb, eh? He was just, for a guy who didn't train all week, coming in with an injury, like you look at the size of him, and he just runs it forwards and still puts them. He still puts them on their back. Like it's quite phenomenal for a guy of his stature. And people that you talk to about him trying to tackle him, they just say he's just like granite. He's just so hard. He can't be stopped. And you sort of see this with wingers for a period of time where they go through 2 or 3 years where they're unstoppable, but they eventually lose that power. But it's like he's getting stronger. And what he did for New South Wales, 200 plus metres in back-to-back games, what he lacks in height and the sort of leaves you vulnerable in the air, he more than makes up for. You just can't leave him out. He's a great player, Brian To'o.
What about Nathan Cleary? And obviously didn't goal kick, and goal kicking cost New South Wales dearly last night. But, Zach Lomax couldn't quite find his rhythm. I thought actually Latrell Mitchell might step up for the third one out wide, but didn't. I don't know if there was any chat about that. But Nathan Cleary, Chammy, he's got a little niggle. Penrith need him because they're trying to kind of make this late season push to miraculously make the 8. But he's got to be managed, and now he's got a huge Game 3 decided to try and get right for. Mitch Moses, not sure what his status is with the pinged calf, but how is Cleary managed in the lead up to Game 3, Club v State?
Well, he's out of this game for the Panthers this week. They were meant to travel to Auckland from Perth, 6-hour flight. They couldn't get any business class flights for the players. They had to fly economy, red-eye flight. It wasn't going to work for Penrith. It was a logistical nightmare, and it wasn't going to be too much on the players' bodies to back up 3 days later on the back of a flight to Auckland from Perth. So they decided not to name him. Look.
Well, why?
Yeah,
why?
Terrible decision.
Why do that?
Look, they would have known from the start of the year that Penrith would be heavily represented. They could have done it better, but it's so hard to get the draw right. You're never going to please everyone. You probably just don't. You just got to make sure that in that situation, the Warriors shouldn't be hosting a game. The Warriors shouldn't be, and it should be. Even in Sydney, like 3 days later, it was going to be hard for them, to be fair. But it was made even more difficult. I'd be surprised it potentially doesn't play the next. Who do Penrith have? They have a 5-day turnaround. That's right. After the Warriors game, they have a 5-day turnaround to the Bulldogs. So that's a huge game for Penrith against a lot of players that they played with, won premierships with, against the team coached by Cameron Ciraldo, who spent a lot of time at Penrith and was a big part of their success. Do they play him in that game? I think a lot will hinge on how they perform against the Warriors. If they somehow spring an upset without their origin players across the ditch, you have the luxury of them maybe resting Nathan against the Bulldogs. But they lose to the Warriors, they cannot afford to lose to the Bulldogs. So it'll be a huge call. Nathan won't, because then he's got to play back up and play origin. So he's got a few big decisions to make here.
He does? Or does the club get involved? Does New South Wales have a say in any of this? That's what I'm interested in, how it works behind the scenes.
Nathan is so good at understanding his body. He recovers better than anyone in the game. He's so disciplined and regimented in his recovery. He will know more than anyone whether he's capable of playing. So he will give Penrith a guide heading into that Bulldogs game. The Blues won't have a say. The Blues will not have a say. I think he would have been leaning towards resting himself if Penrith were in a better situation. But he's the Prince of Penrith, Adam. He's not going to want to sacrifice a season when he knows the game is so critical to them making the finals. Because if Penrith get into the top 8, I don't care where they finish, they can win a competition. They just got to get there. And they're going to limp in because of the fact they have so many players representing them in origin. They're going to limp in, and he can't afford to miss that game. So if he's close to fit, he'll play. But if he's not, then you know that it's a serious injury.
Last point here that's on the rundown for our chat about Origin, Chammy, is who wins. I can answer that. Already know the winner. It's the NRL. Yeah. Did you see Andrew Abdo after the game yesterday, or PVL over there?
No.
It might have been whining and dining Channel 7 executives. We'll get to that a bit later on the podcast version.
Yeah, they would have been, I'm sure they would have been happy around the few people after the game involved with the NRL and the commission, and there's no doubt that it's financially more lucrative for the NRL to have a Game 3. The interest around it, I'll speak honestly, there isn't a lot of interest in a dead rubber. We can build it up as much as we want, but it's not the same. And the feeling going into Game 3, on the back of all the Billy Slater drama, injuries now facing New South Wales, it's going to build up really nicely. I think there were record ratings again last night. I think it might have been pretty similar to Game 1. So it's all set up nicely for the NRL, and you'd be naive to think that they aren't happy with that result.
Absolutely. Even my son, and a shout out to my son who won't be listening to this, but I'll give a shout out anyway, who turns 20 today. He's pumped for Origin 3, and he's not the biggest rugby league fan. So that's the sentiment of the community, Chammy, that's going to break all kinds of TV ratings records, I'd say, for Game 3 in a couple of weeks' time. We're off to a break here on the Journo Show. Back in a sec with plenty more, a little bit more on Origin, the build-up to how it was perceived over there in Perth in the media, and Manly, Anthony Seibold, the future at the Eagles. You have the Journo Show, Danny Widler. We can't locate him. He's obviously chasing up big news for Channel 9 and the wash-up for Game 3. He's actually flying back a bit late to make sure that he gets the story, files for 9 News. He's doing his work diligently, Chammy, whereas you don't care. You just, you do your herald work, but you come here and talk to us. Love it.
I got plenty of things up my sleeve. Don't you worry, Adam. Don't you worry. I don't need to run around like Danny today to get the stories, okay?
Yeah.
That's all I'll say.
He posted a photo on our group chat the other day with a beehive in a tree.
What?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I don't
even
know.
see it. Why didn't I look at it?
I said, is it just full of Michael Chammas type characters to him? And he goes, yes. And he goes, the next buzz. That's what he labelled you as.
I didn't even see that. What a grub.
What a grub. Oh, no. Speaking of which, that spiraled, didn't it, with Aaron Woods? So just back to it.
Can I just say something before you go? Like we're on the podcast now, so I can speak a bit more freely here. the amount of people who come up to Danny and myself in Perth saying, keep giving it to Danny Widler. It's great. It is absolutely brilliant. People love Danny Widler getting hammered. And I'll tell you another thing. I was walking home last night from Optus Stadium to my hotel, and I had a guy in a New South Wales jersey just walking in the other direction. And all he said to me was, he gave me a salute, and he said, thank you for your service. in reference to what that guy told me about Gus. So, mate, it's the podcast is popular in Perth. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it's filling your petrol tank up on you, Chammy. I'm happy for you.
Thanks.
So that word grub, it's kickstarted a series of. It was a culmination of a series of events in that Billy Slater had to stand out front of his hotel the day of the game to apologise for bringing in the family of Paul Green, the late Paul Green, to what was referenced the day before at a press conference, which was in reference to Aaron Woods having a go at Billy and his character that he felt like, which is all fair until the family of Paul Green got involved. You did, as you mentioned before the break, get that statement out of the Green family, and I dare say everyone's just going to park it and leave it right there. But on reflection, all very avoidable.
Yeah. I love the spice that it brought up, and as you said, the Billy. Yeah. Obviously, I work with him at 9, right? And I have a good relationship with Aaron Woods. I have no issue with what Aaron Woods said. And I've got no issue with Billy taking offence to that. It's his right to take offence to that. And it's his right to hammer back at Woodsy, right? No issue whatsoever. They're big enough and ugly enough to deal with that. Billy would recognise that he overstepped the mark with the comments around Paul Green. I know what his intention was, but he completely missed the mark. And not many people that I've spoken to, whether they be friends of Billy's or linked to Billy, who would disagree with that. And the fact that Billy came out the next morning and was so forthright in his apology sets me upon reflection that Billy knew he'd got it wrong. What was fascinating, I spoke about the pressure and what it does to people. Billy had a week to come up with what he said. You could tell that he was quite calculated in what he said. It was somewhat rehearsed or planned what he was going to say. And for him to think that was still the right thing to say shows you the kind of pressure that he's under and that he's not thinking clearly like he would normally if he's not under the scrutiny that he has been under. It may have taken for some people to say some things to him after for him to realise the magnitude of what he'd just done. But the fact that he apologised, I think it's now play on. Like the families accepted it. They weren't happy, but they're not sitting there taking. I'll read to you what was said from the family. Rick Green, I mentioned to you, his brother. He provided us with a statement. He said, "The family regrets that Paul's name was brought into the current narrative and the manner that this has been done. The family wants to reiterate that we love Queensland and its team. We also bear great respect for the person charged with the team's performance. It was unfortunate that Mr. Slater made the reference that he did, but he has responded appropriately and apologised without reservation. We sincerely wish him the best in his role as the coach of our state team. I think that's pretty classy from Rick Green on behalf of his mother and his siblings.
Two things out of that, what you just said. Get to the second thing about the Green family making that statement. But I'm just wondering if Billy let it stew for a week inside, and it happened last year in another realm with the Michael Maguire glass houses, is he seeking counsel from those around him? What kind of counsel is he seeking before he comes out and responds? Or is he internalising it all and thinking that he has the ability to just do it himself and come out with what he sees fit? What I'm saying is, should he have run that past someone who is not involved or is outside or on the periphery of the camp to be the cool head and go, you know what, Bill, maybe leave that one out, or maybe this is how you respond? Because it felt like he just let emotion get onto it. The way he delivered that emotion became too big a factor. And does it need to be when you're trying to prepare a game involving, for a game of rugby league?
I take your point, but I'd be lying to say that I knew the answer to that. I don't know what Billy did in the lead up. I don't know what Billy, if he confides in someone. I imagine the people that he would confide in as a player are the people who were in the opposition sheds, in Craig Bellamy and Frank Panisi with the Blues. So, mate, I don't know. Is the answer. I don't know. I like to pretend I know the answer to everything that you ask me, but I'm not going to lie in this situation.
And I'm not telling the guy how to live, because that's the last thing I want to do. But it just felt like that maybe he's either getting a bum steer from those around him to say, yeah, say that, or he's just let it stew. And you get it because it's Origin, because you know it's an emotional subject. That he wants to do the best for his state that he loves so dearly.
Without knowledge and just the assumption of knowing Billy, I don't know him very well, but working with him and knowing him a little bit, I think he's his own man. I don't think he would. I think he would back himself to make the right decision in most situations. And he said last night, he said he is completely comfortable with the person that he is. He has no issues with the person that he is. That doesn't mean sometimes you don't make mistakes.
Yeah,
I think he recognised that, and he made a mistake. But does that make him a bad person? No. But I also don't think it makes Aaron Woods a bad person for wanting to stir the pot and get in Billy Slater's head, which he was trying to do last year, mind you. If you go back and listen to what Aaron Woods said after games 2 and 3 in the glass houses, he was into Billy. He has been for a while. Maybe he felt like it was his responsibility to rattle his cage. Maybe he genuinely felt that as a player he overstepped the mark. Regardless, I don't think Aaron Woods overstepped the mark, Adam. I think as a New South Welshman, it was rugby league banter. He was talking about what he was like on the field. He didn't say he was a grub of a human being. Never questioned anything he does off the field as a family man. It was about what he did on the field. That opinion is subjective. He played against him. He might have a view that's different to the guys who played with him. He's entitled to that view. I don't think what he did overstepped the mark, nor did I think that Billy Slater overstepped the mark up until the era of judgment around Paul Green.
Just quickly, I can't. Like, I know Aaron wants to get involved and say his piece. That's fine. I don't think people were saying before Origin 1, there was nothing to this build up. It was without spice. It was like, nothing great to kind of hang your hat on with a headline or whatever. The game still rated its brains out and did the same last night with that spice. Like, does it need it? I don't reckon it does. But if it's there, it's there.
Well, it's got to where it is on the back of that spice, Adam. Like, yeah, people love it now, right? And the ratings are good on after game 1, despite the fact that there wasn't a big build-up. But that doesn't mean if you continue to have a lack of hate or a lack of spice in the contest that it's going to stay that way. We need to stay. It needs to be the pinnacle of Australian television, and it is, right? It's the most watched. The 3 games are the most watched sporting events programs in the country. But if you just let it fall away and there isn't that feeling around it of that genuine hate between the states, Well, in 3, 4, 5 years, you'll feel the flow-on effect of that, which is the numbers will start to dip. And it happened. If you remember, in that peak period around when Queensland were winning all those series, they were continually getting 4 million plus for all games. And that was at the peak 8 with Greg Bird and Gal and Nate Miles, everyone getting into each other. It dipped away for a few years after that. It's now starting to pick up on the game itself going really well. But if you don't build it up and there isn't that the animosity, well, in 3 or 4 years' time, we'll see that dip again. So that's the game's responsibility to make sure it stays relevant.
Last one on this subject about the Spice and what happened with Billy Slater and the Green family, etc. How do you go about as a journo in probably the most sensitive area that you could probably tread in asking the Green family to, if you feel like responding, like trying to source that without overstepping the mark?
I was uncomfortable, Adam, on two fronts. One, obviously, it's a real sensitive time for the Green family. And two, I work with Billy Slater, work with Channel 9. And I also work for the Sydney Morning Herald. So when the Sydney Morning Herald asked me, which is a natural reaction to chase up follow from the Green family, my first instinct was, well, do I really want to be involved in this?
Yeah,
I've just I've just had a stink with Gus. Do I need to have another stink with another Nine employee? But then I thought what I said around the Gus situation was, that is my job though. I am in that position on the panel with Gus because I'm a journo and I have to ask the tough questions. Now, I didn't want to go fishing for dirt on Billy or someone to hammer Billy, but all I did was give Rick Green the opportunity that if he wanted to say something, that we would provide him that platform. Didn't go knock on his door, send him an email, said, I understand if you don't want to speak in this situation, but if you do want to say anything, let me know. Didn't expect to hear from him, but I did. He replied. He's a barrister in Brisbane. He replied. It was a really well-written email. I spoke to him after it. He was comfortable with what's being written. And sometimes you think, okay, my natural instinct is, they don't want to be disturbed by the media. But to me, it came across as though they were appreciative of the opportunity to have their voice heard, to have their feelings heard in this situation. So I spoke to Billy after the game. It was all sweet. I feel like it was a classy response from Rick Green and the family, and I feel like Billy handled it well in the aftermath. So, yeah, I had a responsibility as the journo to ask the questions. Whether or not they reply, that's up to them.
Tell you what would make your life easier if you get in those uncomfortable situations involving rugby league stories. Just go and work for the West Australian. Just pretend the sport doesn't exist. So the build-up there, and you got into this on game day with an article for the Herald about how there was an article on Billy Slater in the West Australian about 87. You know you're going bad when you open the page that your sport's on and you got the comics on the other side or the crossword, or in this case, advertisement for sex workers. Front page,
escort
they had
services, I think is the right terminology.
Sorry, yes, escort services. On the front page, you had an advertisement for State of Origin. It was saying, get along and get involved in this weekend's match between the WA's Dockers and Victoria's Bombers, Fremantle-Essendon, AFL game. They're taking the piss, aren't they?
And to follow it up, I just got a text from the great Donny Furnish, the front page of today's paper. Breaking news. One bunch of East Coasters beat another at rugby in Perth last night. There's a few shots there. Rugby. We hate being called rugby, don't we? And they know it. They know it. The editor of the paper, Chris Dorr, he worked in Sydney and Brisbane. He knows it's not rugby. That was a shot. That was a shot at league. And one bunch of East Coasters on the back of them deciding the day before to have State of Origins back on the front page with Victoria's Bombers against WA's Dockers. Origin.
I get parochialism in media, Chammy. It's a thing. It's a real thing, because parochialism in media is the fact that if you own the rights to a certain thing and you are aligned with the TV station, for instance,
explain that, because people don't know that. Explain that. So Seven West Media own the West Australian, right?
Gary Stokes, big businessman, successful businessman over in Perth, self-made man, billionaire. He owns a lot of businesses in WA, very powerful human being. He owns the West Australian. He owns Seven West Media, which own Channel 7. Channel 7 own the rights to the AFL competition. in partnership, loose term, with Foxtel, which is now owned by DAZN, but previously News Corp. So that's an interesting light in itself because they're heavily invested in rugby league as well. But Channel 7 have gone this. This is in no doubt media parochialism because rugby league is not their sport. They're not going to get their hands on it unless a miracle happens with the TV rights in the next cycle. I don't think they're ever going to touch it. It'd be interesting to see if Seven, for instance, did get a State of Origin, what the coverage will be. I dare say that the escort services won't be near any stories about rugby league. That's by the by. But it's everywhere, Chammy, because you look at, I've got to bring in the Nine Network here. A couple of weeks ago or last week, Bulldogs fans were celebrating in Belmore, letting off fireworks in the street and having a great time and everything like that. It was a story of celebration, as it should be. Would they report it that way if it was A-League soccer fans?
Yeah,
Not
I
sure.
noticed you sent me that. I noticed you sent me that during the week.
But if A-League soccer fans,
But I'm a
if
Wanderers
A-League
man,
football
so you're not going
was
to get
on,
me criticising.
yeah, I know. But if A-League football was on Channel 9, it's a thing. It is an absolute thing, media. This is an extreme example, though, of an entire newspaper pretending that something's not happening when
Yeah, but you know what? I'm
54,000
not
of the
buying-
60,000.
I think it was 47,000 were locals. Like, I'm not
Locals.
buying. I spoke to Chris Dorr, or was contact with Chris Dorr, the editor of the West Australian, yesterday. I'm not buying the whole. I think he said to me that it was a game of rugby league between two interstate. If you think a game of rugby league between two interstate teams is more relevant to WA readers than what we placed in the valuable space available in our sports section, well, that's not
Did
true
he?
because I can tell you what, when Spurs played West Ham in a friendly, they gave it a lot of love. When Origin was in Perth 6 years ago, I was here. The same newspaper gave rugby league a lot of love to the point where they were calling for their own rugby league team. Okay, so I'm not buying this whole our readers don't want to read this. It's a load of rubbish. There was 47,000 locals there. Okay,
Actually, when you put it that way, it becomes like, are you okay? Are you thinking straight? Are you all right? And now he's obviously biased with where his paycheck's coming from. I get it, but then he'd leave because Anthony De Segli, the new boss of the Perth Bears, in his days running that paper, he probably would have done the same thing if placed in the current situation, not 6 years ago, current situation. So that's what it does to media executives, and it happens in every frigging industry. You become very biased to the people who are paying your
But you
paycheck.
just want them to own it. Say, yeah, we're Channel 7. We're going to look after our product. But they're not
we
going to
can
own
see
it.
straight through it. Yeah, exactly.
But you know what? It's given rugby, like the Bad News Bears front page, it's given rugby league great attention. I've spoken to a lot of locals about it. A lot of people speak about the West Australian and how it's just an AFL paper. Then
But they bag the crap out of their own players in AFL. Are you? Do you get a sense that something is taking hold, I should say, over there, stuffed up that particular state?
In regards to rugby league?
Rugby league,
in Perth?
Bears in Perth.
Well, everyone you talk to about it, I've been in cabs and jumped in and speaking to people at pubs and restaurants. They all know it's coming. They're not saying this is going to be a rugby league town. It's an AFL town. But it doesn't mean rugby league can't be successful there. I think last night was a good advertisement. Pissing down rain, people still there. Most of them stayed throughout the rain and sat in the rain. Like, if you didn't care and you're at a game because you think, yeah, it could be cool, we'll go watch it. Once it start raining, you leave. But they didn't.
Good atmosphere too. It seemed like a lot of New South Wales fans.
Awesome atmosphere. I was surprised that walking into the ground and even at the ground, like you expect if there's 13,000 travelling fans, you'll see a bit of New South Wales and Queensland jerseys, scarves, what have you. But mate, everyone had some sort of, I'd say 90% of people I saw were wearing some sort of New South Wales or Queensland merchandise.
Yeah, cool.
It's
good for the game.
So people are getting into it in Perth. And I think if they get it right on the field with the team, and it's a big if, they've got a lot of work to do. There's going to be roadblocks. We're seeing it now with the West Australian and the mainstream media. Channel 7 weren't going to send a reporter to the game last night, but after our story, apparently they changed their mind when we were bagging 7 West Media. So they gave it no love in the news the night before. It's borderline embarrassing the way Seven's handled this, but that's their right. They're protecting their patch.
Last one, Chammy, for this particular podcast. There's a lot of Origin chat, but one thing that you've been on this week is the situation at Manly and the future of Anthony Seibold. Okay, you know I'm a Manly fan. Who's coaching my team next year at this stage?
Who do you want coaching your team, Adam?
I don't know. I'm confused.
Are you confident in the Seibold direction?
See, it's a really hard one to pick apart because the current situation this year, he lost his best front rower to an Achilles injury, Daniele Paseka. Doesn't have a stack of depth, but is that on him for not building that depth? And then your three highest paid players, two of them, their best days are behind them, still fabulous players on their day, but Jake Trbojevic and also Daly Cherry Evans, and the other one can't get a consistent run at it out there in Tom. So are they mitigating circumstances that tell you that Anthony Seibold has got an issue?
Hang on, I have to interrupt. My phone's ringing. I've got Danny Widler calling.
Yeah, okay, put him on speaker.
Hello, Daniel.
You're on the air.
Jamie,
How are you, brother?
what's doing?
Oh, mate, you're live on this podcast. You brushed us.
Well, is this never ending? I thought you had finished it by now.
Listen, we're having a good time without you. It's gone 2.5 hours because it's such good quality content. I think Adam's got a question for you. Do you want to ask this guy anything, or you got nothing?
He can't hear me, you idiot.
Oh yeah, he can't hear you. That's right, because I've got headphones on. I'll ask.
You're a technical wizard, aren't you?
What are you doing, bro?
Me.
Where are you?
I'm in the Blues Hotel.
Yeah.
They're about to get on the team bus.
Yeah.
And we've been sort of having a chat to a few of them as they're passing through. Obviously, not happy with what happened last night.
Any Nathan update? How is he?
Well, I think it's a adductor injury. But I think we were sort of pointing towards it in the lead up because he did very little at the captain's run. And there's also a bit of news around Payne Haas also carried I think a groin strain into the game as well, which he injured at a late session. He wore steel-studded boots in a training session, and that aggravated something. So these guys are pretty finely tuned, aren't they? And look, Nathan was always going to play, but obviously the lack of kicking and goal kicking may have impacted that game.
Hey, any goss? Anything happened? Any drama last night? Did you go straight to bed? What happened?
Something.
Me, I was in the dressing room. I didn't see you. Were you there?
Yeah, I was in the Queensland sheds, mate, where I'm welcome.
Okay, I was in the Blues sheds.
Okay.
I didn't see you, but no, just it's always difficult after a loss for the team, and to their credit, a lot of them fronted up, had a chat, and they're already trying to focus on the next game.
Well, you've been boring, mate, so I'm going to let you go.
Okay. Well, I didn't know. I wanted to talk to you about some other things, but that's okay.
Yeah, we'll talk later, okay? I'll meet you at that nightclub a bit later. All right? We'll talk.
See you, Jamie.
See you, Danny. Day club, you mean? You two look like you belong in a day club. Hey, okay, back to Manly quickly. I've stated my case. I don't know, Jamie. I do not know. The question to you is...
Well, that's where they are. That's where they are right now. I think the club
people inside the club don't know.
Well, it's been underwhelming. There are mitigating factors, of course. But when rumblings of what's happened in the last few days start to get out and talk of player discontent, there already are reservations around Seibold's coaching. They were around at the end of last year that there was a limitation to where he could take this, limitations on his coaching ability and a ceiling to where he could take this team. I stand by what I said. It doesn't mean that he's a bad coach, but maybe they've just reached a point, I think they're 3 years in now, where it's not going to get better. They play the Tigers next week after this bye, then the Rabbitohs at home. Both very winnable games. If they lose those two games, Adam, I dare say Anthony Seibold's time at the Manly Seagulls could be coming to an end.
There was something really interesting that was not buried, but inside. It wasn't like the top line of one of his stories on this subject, that Anthony Seibold had. There was talk around that he was happy to pass it over to someone to go, in inverted commas, upstairs or go into a wider role within the club in terms of an overall look at the football department. That, to me, if that is true, and I'll get your thoughts on that in a sec, but that, to me, if I'm a player, that's very, very dangerous information for a dressing room, because they know, they pick up on that they can smell things in the breeze that aren't out there. They're like puppy dogs. Their scent is amazing, players, in this regard. It's like, is this guy... How am I going to listen to this guy for the next 18 months if I know definitively that there's going to be an end point?
Well, subconsciously, I reckon it gets into players' heads. Now that cat's out of the bag. And what happened was in talk with between Tony Mestrov, the Manly CEO, and Isaac Moses, Anthony Seibold's agent.
Your mate.
There was talk around, no comment. There was talk around 2027 get an extension to 2027, and then he would transition to a new role. There was an endpoint to how much he wanted to coach. So Manly, in those discussions, then began to gauge Michael Ennis's interest, because from my understanding, Seibold's recommendation was that over the next few years they would transition Ennis into becoming the head coach. In those discussions, they wanted Ennis to move into a full-time role, because right now he's a consultant, but he's got a lucrative role with Fox. He gets paid by Manly, and to give up what he did at Fox for not much more at Manly, it didn't make financial sense. Michael's got a young family, whatnot. He's got a good life. He's very good on Fox. So he decided he wanted to keep going, but there was an understanding that if they were to transition, that in the last year leading into that role, which would have been 27, that he would become full-time and then move into that. I think having spoken to his manager, he decided that it's best that they don't commit to becoming the coach, because a lot can happen in the 4 years between the conversations at the end of 24 and him taking over in 2028. So that's where it's at. Now, I don't know if Michael Ennis will take over if Anthony Seibold gets sacked. There's an agitating group at Manly who have been in and around Manly of old boys who think they need a Manly flavour.
They're always
That's
there.
a Manly person who needs to be at the helm.
They're in
and
the
Matt
furniture.
Ballon's being pushed. Well, mate, you know what it's like. And Matt Ballon's their choice. There's also been talk around Jason King coming in and whether or not Tony Mestrov's the right CEO. Jason King's at the NRL as the head of integrity. Should he take over as the CEO? I don't know if having all Manly people is the right thing. I don't know what the club's like. You'd probably know better than what I do, living. I have to get my passport out to get to the Northern Beaches from Western Sydney. So
You're welcome.
It's not. They don't like my type out there.
No. Open arms, man. We're beautiful people.
Thank you. No, but that's going to be the big point. And the other one is, do you go for an experienced coach? Do you get a Brad Arthur? Do you bring in the next best thing, who is Josh Hannay? Brad Arthur's coached at the club. His son's there. He's previously, Bob Fulton tried to lure him away from Parramatta to get him to Manly, and he knocked him back. So I don't know where they go. In the short term, these 7-minute interviews that he had with all the players, like it was parent-teacher night, didn't go down well with the players. He's dropped 2 of them, Jason Saab and Lachlan Coker. They're playing cup this week while the rest of the NRL team have a bye. And he's moved Tom to centre. Lehigh Hopewadi to fullback. Huge decisions. Make or break for Anthony Seibold. If they don't come out and respond against the Tigers, because the concern from the hierarchy at Manly was the lack of effort against Newcastle and the Titans in the last fortnight. If there is a concern around lack of effort against the Tigers and Rabbitohs, the conversations now will turn to, is Anthony Seibold's time done? I'm not saying they'll sack him immediately, but the conversations over the next 6 to 8 weeks will then be, does he finish up at the end of the year? Do we need to move in a different direction?
Jamie, we'll leave it there for this episode. You've got the worst flight in the world to hop on. And the reason I say that is because it's so long and you don't even get to go to another country. You just stay in Australia. So it's like a lot of time to spend on a plane to not get your passport out.
But I do have an aisle seat, which is great news, because I was on a window seat and the poor blokes next to me on the way here, I don't like to sit down in the same spot. So I'd get up, whatever needs to be done.
Cannot sit
aisle.
still.
No.
Yeah, that's why Widler calls you the Mozzie, just buzzing about everywhere.
Buzz,
Love
I like it again.
Yeah. Jamie, travel well, mate. We'll catch you back in the studio next week.
Love your work.
Love yours. That was the Journo Show. Triple M, NRL.